Well, today we're going to tell the story. So often when we look at the Bible, we see them as 66 separate little books, and within those separate little books, we take separate little scriptures and we look really deep into some little cutting here and a little smidgen there and a little bit of a piece here, and we forget that it's part of a whole. Could it be that this really is a story of God? A whole story, a from beginning to end story, a Genesis to Revelation look at this God that we love. Well, I think it's time to tell the story. And so for the next few weeks, we're going to go from Genesis to Revelation, and we're going to look at it as story. So I brought my storybook with us today, okay? And we're going to take a look at this book that we call Genesis to begin. I'd like you to not begin, however, as if you were right here in Hayesville, America. I'd like you to pretend that you were listeners, say, in a land of exile. I think we can relate pretty well to that, really. Pretend that you are back 2,500 years or more ago. You're back in Babylon, and you're leaning there by a willow tree or by a rock at the edge of the water. The day is done. It is time for Sabbath. And in the back of the crowd, there's a young man, and he plucks a discordant chord on his lyre, and he sings something like, "On the willows there, we hung up our lyres, for our captors there required of us songs." And you think to yourself, how can I sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? And there's a hush in the crowd. Here we are in a land so far away from the God that we sing of, a time that's far away, and so it seems like we are far away not only from land, but from promise and from God. We know what it feels like to be in exile. We need to hear the story again, from the beginning, the story that our ancestors told us as they first encountered a living God. We've forgotten, or maybe we've never even realized, that the story of God is our story as well. So gather back, settle back, and hear the story long before anybody messed anything up, a long time before all the problems of the world began. There was only blessing and goodness and newness. So listen to the beginning of the story.
First this, God created the heavens and earth. All you see, all you don't see. Earth was a soup of nothingness, a bottomless emptiness, and inky blackness. God's spirit brooded like a bird above the watery abyss. God spoke, light, and light appeared. God saw that light was good and separated light from dark. God named the light day. He named the dark night. It was evening. It was morning. Day one. God spoke, sky in the middle of the waters. Separate water from water. God made sky. He separated the water under sky from the water above sky, and there it was. He named the sky heavens. It was evening. It was morning. Day two. God spoke, separate. Water beneath heaven, gather into one place. Land, appear. And there it was. God named the land earth. He named the pooled water ocean. God saw that it was good. God spoke, earth, green up. Grow all varieties of seed-bearing plants, every sort of fruit-bearing tree, and there it was. Earth produced green, seed-bearing plants, all varieties, and fruit-bearing trees of all sorts. God saw that it was good. It was evening, it was morning, day three. God spoke, lights, come out. shine in heaven's sky. Separate the day from night. Mark seasons and days and years, lights in heaven's sky to give light to the earth. And there it was. God made two big lights, the larger to take charge of the day, the smaller to be in charge of the night. And he made the stars. God placed them in the heavenly sky to light up the earth and oversee day and night, to separate light and dark. God saw that it was good. It was evening, it was morning, day 4. God spoke. Swarm, ocean with fish and all sea life. Birds fly through the sky over earth. God created the huge whales, all the swarm of life in the waters, and every kind and species of flying birds. God saw that it was good. God blessed them. Prosper, reproduce, fill ocean. Birds reproduce on earth. It was evening, it was morning, day 5. God spoke. Earth, generate life, every sort and kind. Cattle and reptiles and wild animals, all kinds. And there it was. Wild animals of every kind, cattle of all kinds, every sort of reptile and bug. God saw that it was good. God spoke. Let us make human beings in our image, make them reflecting our nature so they can be responsible for the fish in the sea, the birds in the air, the cattle, and, yes, earth itself, and every animal that moves on the face of the earth. God created human beings. He created them God-like, reflecting God's nature. He created them, male and female. God blessed them. Prosper, reproduce, fill earth, take charge. Be responsible for fish in the sea and birds in the air, for every living thing that moves on the face of the earth. Then God said, I've given you every sort of seed-bearing plant on earth and every kind of fruit-bearing tree, given them to you for food. To all animals and all birds, everything that moves and breathes, I give whatever grows out of the ground for food. And there it was. God looked over everything he had made. It was so good, so very good. It was evening, it was morning, day 6. Heaven and earth were finished, down to the last detail. By the 7th day, God had finished his work. On the 7th day, he rested from all his work. God blessed the 7th day. He made it a holy day, because on that day he rested from his work, all the creating God had done. This is the story of how it all started, of heaven and earth when they were created.
You can almost hear the sound of the didgeridoo. God spoke the world into being. Out of nothing came everything. Out of infinite love came the creative, living expression of that love. And it was good. Now, I know this story is different from other stories you've heard. It's different from the stories of the capricious gods of the Babylonians, or the story of chaos and happenstance that you may have heard. But this story is our story. It's a story that says that from the beginning it was good, that there was purpose. Out of chaos came hope and order, and that we are creatures of value, part of a co-creating relationship with a God who loves us, and that we can trust this God to provide for us now just as in the beginning. Now, I know that may not seem like it today, as we feel like exiles, as things seem foreign and life is hard. But that is exactly why today of all days we have to tell the story. We must tell the story. And we need to keep telling it so that we can do what God has continually told us to do, to remember, to remember. And from somewhere back in the crowd, a child speaks up and says, please, I have a question. If God is one, why in the story does God say, let us make humanity in our image? Why didn't God say, in my image? I don't understand. And as the child asks, the wise ones in the group smile because they know the answer. Now, they too know the basic creed that God gave us when God commanded us to remember. Shema, taken from the first word in the old original language that means hear. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. The Lord is our God. God is one. And yet us, we, what's that about? And one of the names that we have for God, Elohim, that's plural. It's like the I-am ending is like the S that we add to a word in English. Why would a singular God have a name that has a plural ending? What is this about? And the wise ones in the group smile and nod because they know. They know not only Shema, they know that later in our story we're going to meet someone who was called the Word. One of whom it was said in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. In him, this one called Jesus, God's people came to understand that the one God of Israel, Shema, was existing in three different persons, in Father, in Son, and in Holy Spirit. And yet, although this one called the Word existed in the form of God, he didn't count equality with God as something to be grasped, but instead emptied himself and became one of us, even taking the role of servant. So if this person is the very image of God, and we're created in that image, what does that mean for us? And what might that mean for our relationships? From the beginning, God, a God who is one yet three, inherently relational with God's self, who, wonder of wonders, desires relationship with us personally. Wow. Maybe relationship, community, partnership is so wonderful that God couldn't help but create in order to share God's self with others. Maybe a part of being created in God's image is to be in relationship with God and with each other. We were meant to partner with God in the work of creation and to co-create community. The Greek word is koinonia, that oneness that mirrors God's relationship with us for all the world to see and know that it's real. So every day that we live in authentic community, God-centered community with each other, we retell this story. And the story tells us something else about what it means to be human. It says that on the seventh day, God rested. God had completed creation of all else. And so on the seventh day, God continued creating. God created rest. God created peace, the aha moment, a chance to breathe. God created that too. God did not just spend the day exhausted after all that other creating. God called it holy, Sabbath, Shabbat, a day of rest and renewal and peace. It's a state of being in which antagonism is laid to rest. Grievances and grudges are put to rest and let go. It's not rest from working, it's rest for the soul. It's wholeness within oneself and one's community. It's being at peace with ourselves and with each other and with God. And we neglect that at our peril. It's the lion lying down with the lamb kind of a peace. It's the peace that passes all understanding kind of peace. That sense of calmness and security when your world feels like it's falling apart kind of peace. In the original language, that was called shalom. But God's peace is not just not fighting. It's a world in relationship with each other and with God. And that's the world God calls us to dwell at least once every 7 days. I don't know about you, but I think I need that peace. As I scurry around, I need that day. And that's why God's people have traditionally greeted each other by saying Shabbat Shalom. The peace of the Sabbath be with you. The Sabbath day is an invitation to opt out of all that feverish activity, that self-securing time, and when people are demanding from us everything, and instead say, today's my day to be in relationship with God and with you and with myself. And smile. To take a day of rest is to refuse to conform to a restless culture in which we live, to end our endless striving, to reshape the world into our image, to trust God to provide that shalom, that peace that we long for our lives. And yet how often do we fill that day with our own agendas? And we still hold on to those grievances and grudges and all the hurts that we hang on to. And we hang on to them for so long we don't know how to let them go. And we don't experience the peace. I suggest on this Sabbath, start here and start now with God in creating that peace in yourself. We can't do it on our own. It's God's peace. Just surrender to it. God simply says, give it a rest. I did. Now you do it. Now that's the first creation story. It focuses on an almighty God, the creator of heaven and earth. But there is also a second creation story that some say is even older than the first, that focuses on a God that's not just distant, but a God that's near. Because God is not only transcendent, but immanent, wholly other, right here. It's a story of forming Ha-Adam, the literally soil creature, dirt guy. All right? Out of the dirt, out of the dust of the ground, Adamah, ground, dirt. And so Adam came out of Adamah, and God breathed life into him. God placed him in a garden called Eden to tend it, to care for it. And then God said something God had never said before. God said, that's not good. It's not good. This man is alone. And isn't that amazing? All throughout yours, did you say one time that God said it was not good? Everything was good. The first thing that wasn't good was for us to be alone, to be separated from each other and from God. God says, I will make him an Ezer Kenegdo. I can't even talk today. Kenegdo. Ezer Kenegdo. Ezer, the only other help, we translate it as helpmeet. And in our minds, we translate that as some sort of a subservient aid or assistant. Well, no, because Ezer Kenegdo, Ezer means send in the troops. The only other place you see Ezer in the Bible is it's talking about God. You know, it's sort of like send in the cavalry, right? It's sending in the super strength, the super force. Send in, military armies were referred to back in those days as Ezer. And so this helper is like this, except then it says Kenegdo, guys. Don't get your head too swelled, women. Because Kenegdo means equal. No one is above. No one is the super guy. Kenegdo, Ezer Kenegdo. You are the completion, the help. You are equal with each other and in partnership with God. Wow. Both blessed. Both in the image of God, both in partnership with God. Pretty awesome. This is our beginning. This is our identity, original purpose, original blessing. God grants these humans three gifts then. God gives us the gift of meaningful labor, work, being able to do something. God gives us freedom. God gave them the freedom to eat of all of the food that God had provided, to live in the land that God had provided for them, and even the freedom to say no. And God gave them limits, because freedom without limits is not much of a gift. And so when God gave them limits, he simply gave them one, to not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And yet when we hear this story, what's the only thing that we think about? The prohibition, right? Not God's gifts of freedom and meaningful partnership in God's work, but limitation. And yet we have to look at the whole package, because only when we can say no is our yes meaningful. This weekend, we celebrate those who said yes in the deepest, most committed way. This is where we can choose what we will say. If our freedom to enjoy God's generosity in relationship is to be meaningful, we have to learn that there is the possibility of saying yes and no, and that saying no is what man, Ish, and woman, who was taken out of man, Isha, said. They turned away. But our time is getting low, and I think we need to save for next week what happens when humankind says no and separates from that God of peace and purpose.